Good evening and welcome. Tonight we'll be going over the history and geography of the Netherlands, a really iconic part of Europe. Netherlands meaning the lowlands, and that's because all of this blue area you see right over here is all below sea level. Now, how does that work? Over many years, since at least, we'll get into it in the history, but in the 1100s, they started building dikes. You can see one of the major new ones right here and all throughout to create land that is known as polders. I just did Belgium like a week ago, and I'd forgotten the word polders on the tip of my tongue, and I forget what I said, but anyway. They create land called polders. This whole land here, Flevoland, was created in the 1950s. This was underwater before this land was reclaimed. And that's really interesting how that's done. One of the iconic parts of the Netherlands are the windmills. And those were originally built to pump out water. Before there was electricity or motors or engines that could pump out water. So that's why the countryside is dotted with all of those windmills. The terrain that's created also allows lots of crops to thrive, including most iconically the tulip flowers, which is just super synonymous with the Netherlands. I've got some tulips covered up by the book here. I'll show you lots of beautiful flower pictures in this book after we go over the history. And I suppose the other main iconic part of the Netherlands is Amsterdam. Amsterdam, as you can see, is part of this below sea level part of the Netherlands, so it's full of canals, kind of like Venice. There are lots and lots of canals that go through the city, and people travel by boat, and it's just beautiful. Amsterdam's a gorgeous city. Now, you may notice, looking at this map, that this symbol means a capital. So Amsterdam and this city here, The Hague, are both capitals. The Hague is the administrative capital. It's where all the government buildings are, but Amsterdam's been the traditional capital city since basically Amsterdam was built. So technically The Hague is the capital, but it's kind of both, in a way. Let's see what else. Rotterdam would be the next biggest city. And there's Maastricht down here. We've got, lots and lots of very major cities. You can see them all here. The Rhine River goes right through the Netherlands out into the sea, passing Rotterdam, the longest river in the Netherlands, and one of the famous European rivers. But as you can see, the Netherlands has rivers and all kinds of waterways crisscrossing it all over. This big lake here was once part of the ocean. This is the North Sea from the Atlantic Ocean. This is IJsselmeer, I believe, or Isselmeer. I have some Dutch viewers. Please let me know how to pronounce this, because I haven't started. I have so many books to show you about the Netherlands coming up. I want to make sure I pronounce things as best that I can, so do let me know. I haven't filmed any of them yet, so let me know. This big road was constructed in the 1950s, I want to say, or at least late 1950s, early 1960s, and it created this big freshwater lake. This would be the largest body of water in the Netherlands, although man-made. There's also lots of little islands out here. You can see they're called the West Frisian Islands. And these aren't the only islands of the Netherlands. The Netherlands actually owns some islands in the Caribbean, or the Caribbean Netherlands. They're fairly autonomous. They are kind of oversaw by the Netherlands, but they do their own thing for the most part, some with more autonomy than others, but they voted on that in 2010 to see how much autonomy they would have. Those islands, in no particular order, would be Aruba, Curacao, Bonaire, St. Martin, St. Eustatius, and Saba, down in like the Antilles part of the Caribbean, like the southern area of the Caribbean, so to say. St. Martin's really interesting because it's co-owned by France. So the top half of the island is called Saint Martin, and the bottom half is Saint Martin, owned by the Dutch. So it's an interesting little island. And let's see. The Netherlands, as you can see, is bordered by Germany over here, and then down here by Belgium. Both of these borders are very important to their history. And, you know, without further ado, mentioning history, let's just dive right in. And I should mention real quick before I get into history, if you become a channel member, I'm reading parts of this book out in a very soft voice. No ads or interruptions or anything to it, and putting it in a big playlist of all the, or at least most of the countries I've done, to kind of create like a sleep playlist of just reading from these books. So if you want to check that out, go ahead and hit join. It's only 99 cents a month, as low as I could make it go. Anyway, there have been people living here for a long time. The earliest humans would have been here about 250,000 years ago. Most notably, the Germanic tribes would have migrated here around 650 BCE. There are lots of different peoples in this area. There were like Celtic tribes and, you know, all the usual suspects in this part of Europe. Speaking of usual suspects, Julius Caesar came to this area between 57 and 53 BCE. The Roman Empire established a couple of towns in the area, and generally this part of Europe they called Germania Inferior, or basically like Lower Germany, like before Germany was a thing, in a way. But the Roman Empire came and went. This area was taken over by the Franks. Their first big king, Clovis I, conquered the area in the 480s. A few other peoples came in, most notably the Saxons and the Frisians. There were lots of clashes between the Frisians and what have you. Eventually, some Irish priests came over and converted the Frisians, and a few other people that hadn't been converted by the Franks, since Clovis was like a hardcore Christian convert. Just wrapping up that part of history to a little bow. Wow. That was like a lot of history I just summarized. Anyway, the most famous Frankish king was Charlemagne. He basically created an empire out of what is now Germany, France, and the Low Countries here. When he died in 843, anyway, his land got divided up into 3 parts among his sons. This area was Middle Francia, and later it was partitioned in the year 855 to I think he was a Viking king, Lothar, and it became Lotharingia. Many other Vikings came to the area to raid, and that really weakened the area, and it allowed the Holy Roman Empire to really rise up and seize almost total control of the area throughout the 10th and 11th centuries. This is when the land reclamation begins and agriculture starts to flourish. The economy booms in a big way due to all this reclaimed fertile land they were creating, making ports and things along the coast here. And it started to become a really valuable part of land that pretty much everyone had their eyes on. Eventually, due to like marriage and politicalness, it came under control of the Burgundians and later the Habsburgs, because the Burgundians married into the Habsburgs. They held control from 1384 to 1581. And Amsterdam became an important trading partner all throughout the world with the Hanseatic League in the north, with pretty much like all of Europe. This was like the trading destination. This was like the place to go to trade. And it's like the whole Holland area. I should say that this is not Holland, this is the Netherlands, this is Holland. So the whole Holland industry really exploded in the way that the economy would have exploded in like the 16th century. But anyway, eventually the land came under the control of Charles V of Spain. He was the Habsburg monarch that wound up inheriting this area. And he was extremely, extremely Catholic, and he went to impose that like strict religion on everyone. And this area wasn't really about that. The Protestant Reformation was sweeping through, and people were kind of tired of the Catholic corruption. It wound up sparking what's known as the 80 Years' War. It lasted from 1568 to 1648. A lot of important events happened during the 80 Years' War, so I'll just summarize quickly. First of all, the city of Antwerp, which is in Belgium, but was like part of all of this, was like completely sacked by the Spanish. That was pretty rough. What eventually happened was that the area down here, since they were getting their butts beat, were like, we're just going to stick with Spain and be loyal to Spain, blah, blah, blah. But the areas up here were like, no matter what, we're going to stick together and we're going to kick Spain out. So they created the Union of Utrecht, where, they decided that they were going to become their own thing no matter what. And it's pretty much like all the areas that are the Netherlands today. Also important is that the leader of this movement against the Spanish was William I of Orange. The Orange lineage would eventually become the monarchy of the Netherlands, so that's important to note. Orange is like the national color of the Netherlands. You'll see in this book people wearing orange. And really interestingly, carrots back in the day were like yellow, so they started breeding a new color carrot that was orange to celebrate the House of Orange, and that's how we have orange carrots today. Isn't that something? Anyway, the war would eventually come to a close after King Philip IV recognized the area up here, and this led to the Dutch Golden Age in the 17th century. Science really bloomed in the area. Art exploded. Two of my favorite artists of all time, Van Gogh and Rembrandt, were a part of this golden age. I'm going to have a whole video about them because I'm like obsessed with Vincent van Gogh, and Rembrandt's art's amazing for what it is at the time. I'll get into it then. I just look forward to that. And trade, of course. Like Amsterdam was still popping off with trade. Like always has been, always will be, basically. And they were accumulating so much money and wealth and recognition and power that they started colonizing. They bought what is now the island of Manhattan in the New World, calling it New Amsterdam. It was eventually bought by the British. They named it New York, which it's still called today. They created the Cape Colony in South Africa, where, it was eventually taken over by the British, blah, 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 just like their other territories. But there's still a lot of Dutch influence down there today. And if you know the language Afrikaans, it's very close to Dutch. So their influence stayed there. They had a colony in South America. They called Suriname, which is still there today. It's called Suriname. And their Dutch East India Company colonized many islands in Southeast Asia. They called it the Dutch East Indies. It's now known as Indonesia. We'll talk more about that in a minute. When they discovered Australia, the Dutch were the first to land in Australia. They called it New Holland. The British eventually took it over. They landed in New Zealand, naming it New Zealand after the area Zealand over here, which the British eventually took over, and they were pretty ruthless. But the Dutch were all over the world. Like even in Japan, the Japanese would only trade with the Dutch. The only people they trusted during their isolation period. They were extremely influential during this time. What kind of led to, not the downfall, because they're still very powerful to this day, but what led to like the decline, the end of the Golden Age, was that all of the European powers around them, not long after they popped off, they all also popped off in terms of like colonization and economy and industrialization. So they weren't like the bright beacon of Europe anymore, not for long. Eventually Napoleon came over. In 1806, he established the Kingdom of Holland and placed his brother Louis as king. But he didn't like Louis because he was too sympathetic to the Dutch, so he kicked him out and made the area part of the Empire of France, which lasted until 1813, once Napoleon got kicked out of Europe, eventually, sort of. Anyway, the Congress of Vienna happened not long after that to figure out what the heck to do after the whole Napoleon thing just happened. They wound up uniting all of the southern countries down here, Belgium, Luxembourg's down here, and the Netherlands up here, into one country. The Belgians, or what are now the Belgians, the southern part, was not too pleased about this because they'd been their own thing ever since way back in the 80 Years' War when they joined their allegiance with Spain. And they're kind of like their own culture and everything, so they eventually rebelled in 1830 and declared independence as Belgium, which, like I said, I just covered Belgium like a week ago, so you can check that out. But anyway, the Netherlands remained prosperous. During World War I, they remained neutral, but World War II was a different story because they were invaded on May 10th, 1940 by the Nazis. This was a really awful time for the Netherlands for many reasons that aren't relaxing to say, so I'll just summarize it briefly, not as a way to diminish what happened because it was very awful, but in a way that we can stay relaxed and still learn about history, you know. Rotterdam was bombed to smithereens, honestly. It was like wiped off the map during the Rotterdam Blitz. And not to mention the Holocaust wound up killing most of the Jewish population of the Netherlands, not to mention many other peoples that were targeted by the Nazi Party for extermination. Also, because remember the Netherlands owned Dutch East India, right? Japan invaded those islands, so that was also pretty awful for their economy, not to mention the people living there as well. The country was liberated throughout 1944 and 1945 by the Allies, and so was Indonesia. But in that year, Indonesia was like, we want independence, you know, and the Netherlands was like, no. So they fought a war from 1945 to 1949 until the Netherlands recognized Indonesian independence. Starting in 1954, as they were like picking up the pieces of their country, the Netherlands started a decolonization movement of most of its places. The Caribbean, that's the word I'm looking for, is really the only land that they kept, and that's because the people voted for it. The EU started during this time. The Netherlands, the founding member, same with NATO, the Benelux Union. I should mention real quick that, remember when all these countries formed into one and then Belgium broke off? There's my cat waking up. Luxembourg, it's not in the shot. Luxembourg stayed part of the Netherlands until I want to say the 1890s when Queen Wilhelmina was crowned queen, and Luxembourg did not recognize female heirs, so that's when they split apart. Just fun fact. But, you know, the Benelux Union, which I've done a whole video on, started around this time, and the Netherlands has stuck to a very, very, like, progressive, liberal mindset in terms of, like, laws and politics. They were the first country to recognize gay marriage. They have legalized prostitution in a way, not completely, but for the most part. Recreational safe drugs are a lot more, like, lenient in terms of laws. They're very environmentally conscious. Pretty much everyone rides their bike everywhere instead of driving their car. Just very, very progressive. And that's a good thing because global warming is a thing that's happening. The Netherlands would get very wiped out by that. So it's important. Cat's really thirsty. He really needs a drink, as you can hear. But anyway, that's basically it for history. So let's look at some pictures of the Netherlands. Very, very iconic here. Let's see. Gorgeous tulip flowers. Isn't that beautiful? That is really a sight. Here's a very iconic picture of Amsterdam. The canals, the bicycles, the bridges, the old buildings. Here's a political map of the Netherlands. And here's a painting. You can see the Romans here fighting against, let's see, like I want to say the barbarians, because that's what the Romans called them. Anyone who wasn't a Roman was a barbarian. This is King Willem-Alexander, the current king of the Netherlands. And this, it's like, what part of the Netherlands is this? This is actually Curaçao, in the Caribbean, which is very Dutch-style architecture still, even though it's nowhere near the Netherlands. Here's a big cargo ship coming into Rotterdam. Rotterdam is, I want to say, like the biggest port in Europe, I want to say. Definitely one of the biggest in the world. This is a celebration called Ketty Kotti, and it's a celebration of the end of slavery in the Dutch colonies. And they have a big parade and stuff every year in the Netherlands. Beautiful ballet dancers. It's very much like an arts and culture kind of place. Water everywhere. Sums up the Netherlands pretty well. Here's a physical map of the Netherlands. And so due to all the land reclamation, these weird sand dunes form. It's just like the earth reacting to all this land getting reclaimed. This is somehow just like what happens. This is a music theater in Rotterdam, or just northeast of Rotterdam. It says, look at this picture. How beautiful. The cattle on the polder here. Windmills. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Land reclamation. So the yellow is what the Netherlands was in the 14th century. So all the rest has been reclaimed ever since. Isn't that interesting? This is the new land I told you about that was built in like the 1950s. This is, I just blinked on the name. Where is it? Flavoland. And this looks like a big dike. Yeah. Stopping the water, creating more land. Oh, another gorgeous picture. This looks like a painting. That is beautiful. Fog apparently is a big part of the mornings in Netherlands, like it is here in San Francisco. Amsterdam, of course, and this is Rotterdam. Very beautiful city. A big, what is this? Oh, a red deer, obviously. I know it's coming. I turned this page. When I first looked at this book, I screamed, so I can't forget. Look at this. It's so cute. It's a dwarf rabbit. I can't. Oh my god, it's too cute. Okay, I'm gonna stop. Here's a pilot whale. My cat's here. You heard me saying it's too cute. I'm not talking about you. Ooh, okay. Here's a merlin. Very beautiful little falcon. Some beautiful trees. My cat's leaving. He's not gonna bother. A beautiful palace with the gorgeous garden and forest. We've got a greenhouse here growing some tropical plants and beautiful flowers. This is an archaeologist who's excavating in the mud there. This is a wooden shoe from ancient times. So clogs, another like iconic part of the Netherlands, like the wooden shoes, aren't really a thing anymore. They're mostly just like a little tourist thing. So, but people wore wooden shoes because if you think about it, the land is boggy and wet, and wood is the best way to keep your feet dry. We've got some Teutons, early inhabitants, and a Frisian cow that bred this style of cow with the spots on it. Early migrations and settlements. We have the Frisian areas up here. The Frankish areas is yellow. the brown is the Saxon area. And there's a big Viking ship coming to invade. Looks like the White Cliffs of Dover right there. And this is a drawing of like trade happening from the Hanseatic League, it says here in the caption. This is Philip the Bold, who ruled over parts of what is now the Netherlands when it was owned by the Burgundians. Philip III, ruling from the Habsburgs. This is a meeting that would eventually become the States General, which was like the early version of their parliament. A great thinker. This is Erasmus, one of like the old, like kind of like philosophers of Dutch times. And over here we can see some Protestants taking apart a Catholic church. This is John Calvin, one of the most prominent people in the Protestant Reformation. This is a battle during the 80 Years' War. This is a big battle. This is the Battle of Gibraltar in 1607. Yeah, these are apparently Spanish ships getting blown up by the Dutch. And here is William I of Orange, basically the father of what is now the Netherlands. United Netherlands. So this is what happened after the 80 Years' War. We've got the United Provinces of the Netherlands and the Spanish Netherlands down here. Here's a great map of their colonies. So you can see they had parts of the Caribbean, parts of South America. They've got South Africa here, Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, the Dutch East Indies, and lots of little islands, lots of which I've already talked about, weirdly enough. Let's see, this is some trading ships, and this is the governor of New Netherland, apparently. I'm not going to be able to say his name right, so I'm not even going to try. There's Napoleon. And The Hague, looking beautiful. Example of their like more quote-unquote modern architecture during that age. Here's Queen Wilhelmina. And this is a diamond cutting factory. Wow. These are the Germans invading during World War II. And this is what Rotterdam looked like after it was bombed. Anne Frank, of course, being one of the most iconic faces of the Holocaust, not to mention the Netherlands. You can tour the annex where she and her family hid from the Nazis, hiding here behind this bookcase. I'll do a whole video on Anne Frank, so if you don't know a lot about her, don't worry, I'll catch you up. These are Germans being kicked out of the Netherlands. This is the first president of Indonesia dressing a crowd in Jakarta during its independence declaration. And here are the first gay couples that were married in the Netherlands in 2001, cutting their cake. This big parliament meeting. See the king here? That's awesome. Very traditional looking. We've got pictures of The Hague up here. That's what the city center looks like. Very beautiful place. There's the king again, King Willem Alexander, with Queen Maxima, right? Does it say here? Yeah, Queen Maxima. And this must be this is the House of Representatives. Doing important stuff. Counting votes. The Supreme Court here. Let's read about the flag. I like this part of the videos. The national flag. The flag of the Netherlands consists of 3 equal horizontal bands of red, white, and blue. The flag stems from a banner used by the House of Orange. Originally, the top band of the flag was orange, but the orange dye was unstable and would often change to red over time. So after 1630, the orange was gradually replaced by a red band. In 1937, the current design was officially adopted as the national flag. Here's the king appointing a new Supreme Court judge. Singing for the national anthem. You can see their orange ties there. This is what the provinces of the Netherlands looks like today. This guy's building a chair. This guy's building an engine of some kind. Looks very powerful. They use the euro as currency. Some tulips. My goodness, so many. It's a big industry and has been for hundreds and hundreds of years. A resources map. You can see it's lots and lots of different farmland. And oil, too, they found out here. Let's see, a tourist boat checking out Amsterdam. Something I'll do someday. She just got some kind of stuff. We don't know. She just bought something nice, I guess. KLM is one of the world's oldest airlines. She's reading a newspaper, having some morning coffee. Look at this. This is, what's it called? Flora Holland. This is a flower trading center. These people are all selling flowers around the world. Isn't that weird? It's so cool. A very lively day in Amsterdam. Looks like a big festival. You can see the people wearing orange. Population density map. Very densely populated country. This is just showing you what Dutch looks like. Working hard in school. And some university students on their bikes. Look at this gorgeous church. This is the Basilica of St. Nicholas in Amsterdam. These old churches are something else, aren't they? This is a priest spreading Christianity here to the Frisians. And a little church service. Here's what a Reformed church looks like. Very different from the Catholic Church. This is the Jewish Historical Museum. And this is inside a synagogue. Lighting chandelier. Benedict de Spinoza, he was one of the important figures of the Enlightenment. And this guy's reading from the Quran. Playing some music. Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. One of the most iconic paintings in the world. His brushwork is so beautiful. Anyway. This is some modern art. Big modern sculpture. Another, or just an author from the Netherlands. She survived World War II and wrote about her experiences. A bookshop that was once a church. A very famous poet and orchestra. This band called Blue Diamonds. And, of course, football's huge. It is in most of Europe. Here's a weird sport where it's kind of like what's that called in the Olympics anyway? They use the stick to jump over the canals. See if they make it without getting wet. Some people ice skating. Cold, cold day. A beloved author, like a children's author. Speed skating is very popular. Riding bicycles is super popular. Everyone rides a bicycle. And there's some windsurfing and some equestrian. Having a fun day in the snow. Enjoying breakfast. Eating some fish. What are these called again? Aren't they like cod? Anyway, that's weird. I love fish, but I would never ever eat it like that. Poffertjes. Again, Dutch viewers, let me know if that's how it's pronounced. But they're kind of like little pancakes, and these are little fried balls of dough. Enjoying some cappuccino, looks like. This guy's making some clogs. And this is the King's Day. They're all wearing orange out on the boats having a party. And here's Santa Claus, the Dutch Santa Claus. Looking very jolly. And I believe that's the end. Yes, so. Ooh, they got some cheese. Oops. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this video relaxing and educational. If you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to check it out because I have a lot more videos coming out about the Netherlands. And I hope that you have a very good